Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest ThingCast. I am Josh Weiss, producer and co-writer on The Thing Expanded. I am joined by my fellow producer Dominic Wallace and our writer-director Ian Nathan, and our guest of honor Chuck Pfarrer, writer of the Dark Horse sequel comic. We are awaiting John Higgins, the illustrator. He's having some technical difficulties. He'll hopefully be right with us. But Chuck, thank you so much for joining us.
Guys, it's a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. It's good to talk about one of the few graphic novels I wrote that I actually really like.
That's
A
awesome.
writer that likes his own writing? I think that's illegal, isn't it?
I'm brutal on myself, believe me. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to start off, Chuck, I mean, what was your initial introduction to the 1982 film?
You know, so I was in graduate school, actually training to be a clinical psychologist, which is a very odd thing for a SEAL team commander to have as an academic background. And, it was, I actually remember the original Thing, from the black and white era on TV when I was a kid. And this remake, and I went to it without thinking in the theaters, not thinking it was going to be anything great at all. And of course, it was, as we all know, amazing. So that was my intro.
Chuck, I'm just going to stop you with that. You said you were a SEAL team commander. You just sort of thrown that in as if it doesn't, casually.
Yeah.
Just gives a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah. Well, I was a Navy brat. My father was a naval officer. I lived all over the world as a kid. I wasn't the greatest student, and I wound up being sent, not went, to Stanton Military Academy, one of the oldest and toughest military prep schools in the nation. So, reform school for middle class kids. I got out of there. I had an appointment to go to the Naval Academy. I didn't go because I thought I've had enough military, and I went to school in Los Angeles where I surfed and was a psychology major. I dropped out of graduate school. I felt I needed a challenge. I joined the Navy SEALs, and I was in there for 8 years, and I was a squadron leader at SEAL Team 6 when I got out.
Wow.
And I sold the screenplay while I was in the Navy and went to LA and joined the circus.
Brilliant.
And it looks like John has joined us. John, can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Welcome.
Here.
Johnny's happy.
Hi,
I don't
John.
know if anyone can hear me.
Yes, we can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can.
Yeah. And John, we were just asking
I
Chuck.
can't hear you guys, sorry.
Okay. Gotta love technology, folks.
Just casually
well-
dropping by with the best background ever as well.
Yeah.
Look at that artwork
Yeah.
in the bag. He can't hear the
Nothing.
compliments we're granting him.
Nothing.
Sorry, guys.
Um,
I'll just sit
Well, I
here
guess-
and look gorgeous.
well, I guess we'll.
We should continue with Chuck's story.
Yes. Until
you-
John can hear.
So you joined Hollywood. You joined the circus, as you say. So what leads you comic books? What leads you
Well, I had a couple of. I got to Hollywood. And I got some lucky breaks. The first thing, well, not the first thing, but one of the projects that put me on the map, I wrote Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen, and it was in development. And the next thing that happened was I fell in with Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert, and we wrote Darkman together. And I ran into Mike Richardson somehow, and he told me that, look, Universal owns the rights to, well, I wrote a bunch of other graphic novels for Dark Horse as well. But he said, look, Universal has the rights to The Thing, and would you like to take a bash at a graphic novel? And at the time, I had a three-picture deal at Universal. And I said, absolutely. I'd love to do it. You know what? I had to teach myself how to write graphic novels. And back then, there wasn't really a format. So as a screenwriter, I just used just slug line and briefly described the frame and the characters and the dialogue. One of the greatest things, and I hope John can get his stuff going here, is we just seem to work perfectly together in that format. John's work is astounding, and it was a really delightful experience. It was really great working together.
And Chuck, I mean, this is a decade after the Carpenter film had come out. Had it already started to get the cult following that it now has?
Oh yeah, I definitely think it did. And when Mike approached me about this, the first thing I did is go out and, man, this is dating me, guys. But get a VHS tape
Oh yeah.
and watched it about, I don't know, 5 times. I'd already seen it at least twice, but I just sat there and looked for every little clue, nuance that we could predicate something on. And again, I always look at it this way. It's the same as film as in a graphic novel. You in a screenplay, hand it over to the director and it becomes his movie. And in this case, no one is going to sit down and read my script for the graphic novel. It's just nobody's going to do it. But you put it in the hands of John, and it became magic.
I was about to ask, how much creative freedom did you have? Did you have anyone breathing over your neck saying, no, this needs to happen. We need more of that. We need more of this.
No, that was one of the things that made it so great. I mean, that happens in the movies, but
Yeah.
we could do anything we wanted. I think the only line was it had to be good.
Now, Chuck, obviously your task, once you're tasked with writing a sequel, ostensibly to The Thing, is you have to run that line of how much do I go back into the original and answer those many unanswered questions, all those things that are teased. One of the brilliant things about the original film is that it's what we don't know is what's so powerful. And one of the main questions being, is either of McCready or Childs infected at the end? But much more than that, the movement of the creature, how it works. How much of that did you take on board? How much did that worry you? How much did you sort of embrace that? And what was that challenge like?
Well, I came to this perhaps erroneous but not exclusive conclusion that it was actually contagious, like a disease. That there was some vector that communicated it to human. And in my head, I imagined it as kind of a cold, and here's the big but there were unknown mechanisms also at play. So I didn't even console it to individual contact. And for example, even in graphic novel, it has a variable incubation period. Some people it takes weeks, or not weeks, but certainly days. And in the case when the SEAL team arrives to rescue the people at the station, one of the guys is infected almost instantly and blows out completely so that unpredictability is really there. And something way in the background is how good the first Alien was. And that was fairly recent. That came out when I was an undergraduate in college. And not knowing, the scariest thing about Alien is not knowing. And for me, the most terrifying moment of that film was Harry Dean Stanton on the radio looking around saying, I can't see it anywhere. And you see a pipe behind him move, and my stomach knotted up. And I thought, oh my God, it looks like the machine.
Yeah.
It looks like the ship. And you still hadn't seen it then. And you don't see it again for 40 more minutes till Sigourney Weaver chases it around in her underwear, which is another thing I learned, you know? So,
I think that's really cool. The almost like some people are more susceptible or like they get assimilated faster than other people. I think that's a really cool addition to the lore.
well, you know, it was such a complete, such a brilliantly executed bit of work. And, you know, as a half baked Jungian psychologist, to me, every good story goes back to the absolutely archetypal works. And in the case of The Thing or any good sort of sci fi horror movie, whatever it is, it goes back to the Minotaur in the labyrinth. And what I mean by that is it's always a home game for the bad guys and an away game for the good guys. And you are on their turf whether you think you own the haunted house or not, when they're in it, they own it. And, you know, every good story does that. And again, you know, we're talking about the genius of John Carpenter. You know, we're not talking about the guys that made the graphic novel. We're talking about John's absolute genius as a filmmaker.
How much did you consciously or unconsciously try to adopt his style? Obviously, you were taking on his characters, the kind of setup and storyline you were carrying on. Do you think you channeled something of John Carpenter?
You know, I've really tried, but it's so hard to get the atmospherics, you know, that you know, it's funny. I was talking to my dad this morning. I was saying, "Oh, I'm looking forward to doing this afternoon," and you know, those memorable moments I mentioned in Alien. One of the most memorable moments for me, in the thing when the Wilford Brimley, you know, get away from me. You guys are all fucked. Get away from me. And he goes into his shed, and later they find out he's building a spaceship. And I got to work with Wilford later in my career. So that
Fantastic.
was one of those moments, and I thought, if you can't trust Wilford Brimley, who can you trust?
What is
I
he
mean,
there?
the oatmeal guy, you
Let
can't
me
trust.
come back in. I'm all right. Let me come back in. I'm all right now.
With the
No.
noose in the background.
I'm all right now. Yeah. Okay. Oh,
And in a way, you almost kind of gave this comic was kind of like what Aliens was to Alien. You're bringing in this kind of these larger stakes, this military aspects. Can you just talk a little bit about bringing your military background to this comic?
well, you know, one of the well, I understood. I mean, I dropped the seals in there. I understood. Look, if something like this actually happened, and something went totally south at a Antarctic research station, who could you get there right away, right? Who else can jump out of an airplane at 20,000 feet and land on a target, right? It's us. Actually, that isn't really so much the Green Berets' job. I mean, they exist to train partisans behind enemy lines. We're like the direct action guys. So I could really see how this would happen. We'd parachute in. In fact, the SEALs have been used in hundreds of rescue operations around the world, even administratively. Guy gets sick on his yacht in the middle of the Pacific. They jump in a SEAL team. You know, we drop in with a boat, and I'm a sailing captain. There must be 20 other sailing captains in the SEALs and take his boat over. But especially at the beginning, McCready, is going through the snow. A light hits him from above. You don't know at first if it's the aliens. He doesn't know either. Wakes up in that sick bay. But the first thing he thinks is, if I'm infected, everyone on this ship is infected. And they're going to go back to port, and it's going to be over for everybody. I like the personal responsibility of both Childs and McCready. Neither one of them appear to want this thing to spread. So, yeah, it's just again, John Carpenter is he's the guy here.
Did you debate
Absolutely.
the great question of if you were infected, would you know you were infected?
There's one of those things, and I said, I thought you do know you're infected, but what if you don't? So I acted on the premise that you do know if you're infected, but then I thought, what if what if Childs doesn't know he's infected? And I was also playing this angle. What if we'd see McCready do all this stuff, but he's actually infected?
You toyed with the psychology. That's your psychology major playing around there.
Absolutely. But there is a limitation in the graphic novels, really, in that communicating the atmospherics is difficult, and that's of course John Higgins's role as well. But cinema's a lot easier to make things atmospheric. In fact, it's like having a composer do your theme music. A good cinematographer can make a crappy screenplay a lot better. You know, think how bad Aliens would have been if they spent $200 on the set. Right? It would have looked like crap.
So, what was more fun to write then? Because a lot of the action set pieces, that's going to be like mainly John's field house, right? Doing a lot of the artwork. Surely that must have been relatively boring to write comparative to more of the character driven, dialogue heavy moments.
You know, I was primarily an action writer, so that I don't know. And I also look at it, this way. When I want to be artistic, I write a novel. I mean, I'm also a novelist, so you can do that. There's a certain amount of entertainment that the audience, of course, watches, but I never thought of The Thing as an action movie. It's a classic alien genre, and again goes back to the original screenplay. And you can look at the atmospherics in there. They got a research station in the Arctic, but it has nice wood paneling and curtains, and you know, I mean, and those some of those great moments where they go out to see what it is the Norwegians are actually doing, and they find that ship, and it isn't just an SUV stuck in the ice. It's got its own zip code, and see, there's one of those moments. So visually, that communicates to you their power, their technology, how many of those critters were on that ship.
Yeah.
I think I would have just gotten the helicopter and flown to Chile.
Unless Blair had done the helicopter in before you could leave.
You got a problem down here in droning mod land. I think you want to clean this up.
And was it always the plan to do 2 issues? I know we eventually got follow-ups, but
Yeah,
did you talk about doing it longer?
yeah, I did, and I originally said I would do 4, but I got so busy. That's one of the regrets actually that I didn't. I wasn't didn't have the time to take it the full distance. And I
Where
think
would
Mike
you have
was,
taken it then?
yeah, Mike
Asking the
was,
$1 million question.
yeah, yeah. Where would I would have taken it? I think I would have gone to the point where people don't realize they're infected, and then you'd have a standoff where someone says, "Look, I'm not," but their blood has shown that they are, and you're going to have to really. I would have put a hero in contact, and what do you do? This person is swearing to you they're not infected. You know they are. What do you got to do? You got to kill them, right?
I
They're
absolutely
saying,
love
"Don't do it. Yeah, I'm
the
your brother.
stakes.
Don't do it." Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the stakes in your story get wider and larger, but the story focus gets so granular. It's an internal conflict at the end. I love that.
yeah,
That is pure psychology at work. I just love it. And that's what makes the thing so special, isn't it? It makes you constantly question what's going on.
it does. And if you just another kind of rule of that Minotaur and the Monitor thing is you keep pushing the walls in,
Yeah.
right? Because that conflict takes place in this wide labyrinth, but eventually it's going to be settled in one hallway, right?
Hmm.
Mano a mano, one on one in some corner. So, but again, that's this is pretty highfalutin talk for an action writer. So, and I do not listen. You get your butt kicked so bad as a screenwriter in Hollywood that look, I have no, you know, I am not on a high horse. Believe me, it's like being a plumber, right? And they only call you when the toilet's full of what, and you got to get in there. That's what being a screenwriter.
Well, let me ask you then
Everyone
Chuck,
needs a
about
plumber.
Bill Lancaster, the original screenwriter of the Thing. and I think that's an astonishing piece of work, that screenplay. Not only the characterization in the moment, in the Hawksian moment, in terms of the understructure of what's going on, the movement of the infection, the elusiveness. He had to sort of assemble a film on two levels. I wonder what is your appreciation of that screenplay?
Oh, it's great. I wished I would have written it. And to be honest with you, my first couple of movies just weren't on that level. They just weren't as good as that. Absolutely not. But a little aside here. So one of the greatest Mars movies ever made was, of course, The Martian. One guy on Mars. I sold a screenplay for a ridiculous amount of money, and it was called Alone. And it was about three guys who crash on Mars. Two of them, one's dead, another one dies soon after, and there is one guy trying to get off Mars. The screenplay was called Alone. They paid a gazillion dollars for it. They added 8 more people, and they called it Red Planet. Okay.
I'm with you.
15 years later, somebody films my screenplay literally beat for beat. Everything, and it makes $1 billion. So as a screenplay, look, I don't even feel vindicated. That's how bad Hollywood is. And I finally got fired off my own movie because I kept saying, look, you paid for a screenplay called Alone. I don't want to add 5 more guys. Okay? This is about Carrie Ann Moss and Val Kilmer. It's their love story. He looks up every day and sees her go overhead. They can only talk to each other when she's right overhead. That is the story. You're fired. So, to all
It's
the
the story of every talented writer out there, isn't it?
Literally.
The moment you try and hold steady to your creative genius. That's why I asked at the beginning. That's my first question was, "Hey, how much creativity did you have in that comic of yours that you wrote?" Because I'm convinced not every producer, because I'm here with 2 fellow producers, but most producers tend to squeeze out a lot of other people's creativity for what they see as the most profitable film they can make.
yeah,
And it's not really about a creative through line, which I think, well, I know The Thing had a creative through line. And look, it was a bomb, notoriously. But over the years, everyone who has watched it has seen the genius of it. And that's why it holds a very healthy fan base to this day, over 40 years later. And that hurts my soul to say how old the film is, but it's still beloved, and it's going to be beloved for generations to come because the film is a masterpiece, and it had a creative through line that was respected on set. I mean, the film we're making currently, we go into the details of how the film was made and the creative processes within it, even down to special effects with Rob Bottin and his crew.
yeah.
Just the creativity they were allowed to employ, it shows on the film, and it flows through into your work. Uh, Actually, how much of the film visually did you take into consideration when writing this sequel narrative? Like,
Well,
how many of the visual keys did you think
all,
this needs to be here?
all of it, and I wish John was here because he is the one who had the eye. For example, this really iconic cover of the first edition of the graphic novel with it's actually one of the seals helmet and head, and the thing is bursting out from it. I mean, that's 100% John. I mean,
It's gorgeous.
describing a scene paddle, I would say, the thing leaps from the chest of one of the guys, just and left it all to John. But it was so good to work with him. It was so simpatico, seamless. And another great thing about it, we didn't have a studio
Yeah.
weighing down on us, which is what happens. Like I said, I had a 3-picture deal at Universal. That sounds great, but it's you're always fighting the studio somehow.
Yeah. What is it like to? And one of the genius elements of the original film is that you never see the thing. You only see sort of iterations of the things it's encountered. So that leaves it constant. It's a constant blank page. The creature. It can be anything you want, and that was the genius of Rob Bottin's idea. But of course, it's an enormous challenge, then, isn't it? Take up the kind of baton from Rob Bottin and carry
Oh,
on inventing versions of the thing. What was that like?
well, I knew I couldn't hold a candle to these guys. All I was able to do is use their toy box, right?
Yeah,
So, and it's interesting. I actually think the thing had a pretty profound effect on Alien, right? Because you kind of had the same critter. It got into people and changed them. But in the case of Alien, you saw the thing. You saw
yeah,
what was doing this. But in the thing, you never saw the original thing, right? It wasn't scuttling under a desk. The only thing you saw was iterations from other species. Now you compare that against Alien, right? The same thing.
yeah.
The right. And if an alien infected an alien, you got to quit, whatever. But on and on. But I had just and I think maybe other writers, I just had a profound respect for their work, and I didn't want to blow it, and I didn't want to knock this thing off and not give it any thought, and I just that's what I said. Like I watched, I don't know, at least 6 times with a notebook in my lap, rewinding it,
Yeah, yeah.
looking back. Did he lift his finger? The "I'm all right now" speech.
Oh, yeah. Did Blair put the pencil to his lips during the autopsy?
Hey,
Oh,
hey,
it's my life.
exactly.
It's absolutely my life at the moment.
Well, absolutely. Well, we became scholars of the work. And I tried to get my hands on the screenplay, and I couldn't. Of course, now you could type in
Yeah.
with a search engine and get a screenplay, which I think is great. It's cool.
Did you read the novelization at all?
No, I didn't, and I don't know if I would have because I kind of thought I want to get my take on it, and the idea of canon wasn't as
Yeah.
developed then as it is now, and I'm all for canon, absolutely.
I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, it's argued obviously endlessly about all different franchises, what counts as canon and what doesn't. How do you perceive your comics? Do you think this is canon? Do you want people to believe this is canon?
I would be very flattered if they thought it was canon, but to me, I believe that to the original guys, right? I wouldn't get in an argument with the original screenwriter about my take on it. I just wouldn't. But arguing in my own defense to make it canon and John's, we really put a lot of thought into it. You know, we
Just to take us aside for a very quick moment, Chuck, we have someone live saying, this is Ken Glover saying, Chuck, don't think anyone here would disapprove of you tackling a legacy sequel after all these years. You could do so much in comic book form or even in a novel. So, if you ever get the chance and you're ever questioning, should I not, the audience wants you to
well, thank you.
do it.
You know, please get a postcard and send it to Universal and say, bring that old geezer out of retirement and let him do it. Yeah, listen, I would love to do that. But I would also say this: that is such a valuable property that the chances of a geezer like me getting a crack at that, it's not. There's going to be some young, bright thing in Hollywood, and good on them.
Why?
But I
Yeah.
show them respect for the process and the product.
Why do you think we haven't had that sequel? We had a kind of prequel that didn't go down that well, but now it's become this enormous, beloved, cult film. Why haven't we had the Thing movie sequel?
I don't know, but I can say this. After the first 2 volumes, you know, uh, Mike Richards and I independently went into the studio. And like I said, I had a deal then. And I said, look, here's the storyboard for the sequel. Take a look at this. And one of the things I thought might work is Hollywood is crazy, right? So you're working for a studio, you write screenplays, you give it to an executive, they're not going to F and read it. It's only 100 pages, triple spaced. They're not going to read it.
Yeah.
And so, I put the comic book, and I'll tell you another graphic novel story later. But I said, look, this will take you 5 minutes to go through it. Just look. This could be an unbelievable sequel. I don't know, not unbelievable, but you got to pitch
Yeah.
it, right? And it just never happened. And I don't know why, because Universal, I'm virtually certain that they had the rights.
Yeah.
So I don't know why.
And is there a reason it wasn't just called The Thing? Why was it called The Thing from Another World?
That was a contractual bit as far as I was concerned. I mean, Mike told me it's a sequel to The Thing, and the title says "Thing from Another World." So
It may be because there's a very popular comic book character called the Thing, and so the medium may have been like, okay, let's differentiate these slightly.
Dominic,
True.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and the legal. Well, here's another graphic novel story and a disaster, right? So I go into to Universal and I say, look, I've got this idea, and it was very Thing-like that this satellite communication ship is out in the middle of the Atlantic, and they get a signal, and it infects their ship. But what it is a digital life form, and it's going to jump from machines to humans, and then it's going to tear humans apart and use them as machines. Forget it. Don't want to do it. So I wrote it up, called Virus. It sells 450,000 copies. Then I go back into the studio and I go, hey, remember that stupid idea you threw out? Well, okay. So then they make it a movie, and God bless John Bruno, the director, but it was a disaster. It was, if I could have just not gone in the office the second time, I would have been happy.
Yeah, but that Schadenfreude feeling must have been fantastic, just to slam it on the table and be like,
That that was the best moment of my whole career in Hollywood, to go, "Yeah, remember that piece of shit? Here you go." But you know what? Then I know it sounds ridiculous, but then I had to count on them taking the time to read 4 comic books.
Yeah.
I can say all this stuff because, man, it's to everyone out there who wants to be a screenwriter, look, just don't. Write a novel. I mean, right? Yeah. And the difference between being a novelist and a screenwriter, you're a screenwriter, you're the guy wearing the white tennis shoes in the meeting, and they send you out for coffee. You walk into Random House or St. Martin's Press, and they go, "Would Mr. Farr like a cappuccino?" I'm like, "Mr. Farr, who came in here? What's going on?" The difference between how they treat you in a publishing house, which is like, "You want a foot rub? Can I get you can I get you a jellyfish?" And being a screenwriter where you make a ton of money, but they treat you like crap.
Yeah. Chuck, you mentioned you'd met Wilford Brimley.
I did on
He's a character, isn't he? Yeah.
he Wilford is just Wilford. He doesn't play any role. He's just that guy. And in Hard
looked the
Target,
same since Cocoon.
absolutely. Hard Target with Jean-Claude Van Damme, which we also called All Van Damme All Damn Day. And Wilford played his uncle. And
Yes, of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's just I dug him. Wilford is Wilford, and yeah.
I think he was a great sort of catalyst amongst those guys, and the cast of The Thing. But he was a bit more of a traditional guy, and they were all kind of New York intellectuals. And I think he enjoyed rubbing them up the wrong way a little bit.
I totally dug him too. I considered him as sort of this, exactly. You guys are all pencil neck geeks. I'm a real geologist, right? I get out there and I break the rocks, and you morons. So, oh, what a great movie! I mean, what a great movie!
Yeah.
Oh,
But Chuck, you see,
Well,
you tell these stories of woe and Hollywood, at its worst. But you've written some great movies. You've really, run the gamut of stuff people remember. People love Hard Target. It's just a great fun movie. So you've made your mark, certainly in the movie world.
well, you know what? I look back and I dislike most of them, but I got to work with some really amazing people. I got to work with Sam Raimi. I got to work with John Woo. I had a movie with Sidney Poitier in it. You know, one of the most amazing, kind gentlemen you would ever meet. If anyone wanted to play the Hollywood jerk, it was him, and a gentleman of the old school. So that stuff is good, but it is a really odd life. I'm a bit of a loner, really, and I never got into the Hollywood scene. I was never going to these parties with these guys. Look, I was a surfer. I'd always just go out and surf. You realize that none of these people are like your friends. And to go from the SEAL teams, where even if you hated my guts, you take a bullet for me,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And then to go to Hollywood, where people screw you over just so they can get 15 more cents than you can. They'll lie right in your face, cash your checks, and go. So
Do we have John? Can
Uh,
John hear us?
can you hear us, John?
That is the
I don't
million-dollar
Still
question.
no luck?
no, I seem
Yeah,
see you, John. I'm not sure John's moving. I
yeah.
don't think we've got a great connection there.
I'm
I
so sorry.
desperately want to ask John about that artwork that Chuck was actually mentioning with the SEAL team member with I think he has a helicopter helmet on, and it
Yeah,
looks very much like a scene out of Terminator 2. And
yeah.
91, the film came out at the same time. I want to know if he was inspired by T2.
I hope so. That helmet that he's wearing, we do high altitude parachute jumps, and we've gotten a slightly more streamlined gear now. But in those days, we wore a jet pilot's helmet and oxygen mask because
Mhm.
you're jumping out of the airplane at 40,000 feet. So there's no, that's twice as high as Everest. And again, you get parachute pay in the Navy is $100 a month. So you're making that, cashing that big Navy paycheck to jump out of airliners.
Uh,
Right.
John, we need to
It's a
fix these
living. It's a
gremlins.
living.
Yeah, I'm in contact with John right now. I'm trying to see if maybe we can ask some questions over DM.
Okay.
So stand by.
I wonder if Chuck,
But
you can maybe just give John an introduction. Just tell us about him as an artist and the pleasure of working with him.
Oh,
What he brought to your writing.
it it really was. Dark Horse put us together, and I think they sent me a couple of samples, and I just said, absolutely. But the I if they told me, look, John is working. I mean, I don't think I had authority over who works with me or not. But the process of working with John was so delightful. He's so talented. He asks questions. It became a real collaboration. And on most of my graphic novels, I write them and I don't even talk to the artist. It's just I throw them over my shoulder, and somebody else did them. But John, it was so great to work with him. Honestly, it was one of the best creative experiences of my life. And John is a true English gentleman and a very talented artist.
What was the
and did
most
you?
memorable piece of art that John showed you that just inspired you to like? Did any of his artwork inspire you to alter anything creatively on your side?
You know what? I don't know if I altered it, but there was he sent some panels, and one of them was, I remember, in the description, Childs is in the foregrounds, and one of the seals is looking over his shoulder, and it was so perfectly cinematically framed. Like the point of view was about 10 feet up, looking down, and this would have been the POV of the threat. It was all so beautifully composed and laid out. At that moment, I just thought, okay, he gets it. He has a cinematic eye. And again, you know, hundreds of thousands of copies would not have been sold of my script. No, but that isn't it. So John's the pointy end. You know, he's the guy that made the cover that people looked at, said, "I got to read this," and you know, the story is the story. But they wouldn't have kept turning pages if his art had not been so spot on.
Oh, I can see the copies on his desk in the background as well. This is just teasing us.
Yeah,
We need to get John
yeah.
on the blower.
Yeah. We can hear. I just let him know we can hear him, so he can chime in at any time. Um, just
We
so
can hear
Chuck,
John, or John can't hear us.
Uh,
exactly.
Okay. So can
So
we put
close.
questions to John?
Yeah.
We,
Um,
let's.
yeah.
You're in
But
communication with him, aren't
You
you,
know,
Josh?
yeah. I let him know that we can hear him, so he should just chime in.
okay.
Um, but Chuck, real quick, did you read any of the follow-up comics that came out after, Climb to Fear, Eternal Vows?
I did, but again, I was getting so pulled
Hmm.
by Alone and Virus and Hard Target and then the Jackal. I I think these were I then I sort of got out of graphic novels, which maybe I'll go back to. We'll see. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, I mean they kept it moving forward. The series did well.
Cool.
Gotcha. Um,
So can we send a
yeah, I'm
message
trying.
to John to tell him
Yes, I'm trying to.
his experience
Yeah.
on the sequel graphic novels?
Um, yeah.
I feel
I'm trying
bad
to.
hogging.
Windows. I can't get a hold of anybody.
Yeah. I'm trying to, because I'm letting him know to check his
Right.
private messages on the live stream. Because we're emailing right now and that's a little slow.
Okay.
So hopefully we can get him in a sec. But yeah, I mean, Chuck, did you see the 2011 prequel when it came out?
No, I actually didn't. Uh, Here's another weird thing. So after I left Hollywood, started writing novels, but then I went back to being a defense and counterterrorism contractor. So I was out of the country a lot, and my head was in the national security space. So I missed a lot of it. What did you guys think of it? You said you didn't think it.
It's a film, I think, that struggled with in its own creation. I think people went into it with more ambition than maybe the studio allowed them, and I think they wanted to tell a more developed story. We interviewed the director for the documentary, and he originally wanted to make it in Norwegian because it's about the Norwegian base, which obviously makes logical sense. But to a studio, you might as well be speaking in Norwegian to the studio, who went, "No, you've got to have a woman. You've got to do it in." Yeah, I think it sort of replays the same film in slightly inferior way. It's that prequel problem. It answers questions you hadn't really asked, uh,
Right.
and so you're kind of left a bit like, I didn't want to know that. I didn't need to know that because all that wonderful mystery feeds the film I know and love. The 1982 version.
Right. Or it gives you an answer that you didn't
Yeah,
that you didn't think it's not a satisfactory answer
Yeah.
to, yeah.
yeah,
There, you know what? It's interesting. If we had been offered, or if the sort of assignment had been predicated on a prequel, I think I really would have enjoyed that as well.
yeah,
But you're right. Whatever comes before, it's farther in the rearview mirror, and
yeah.
therefore it appears smaller. But you know what? As a writer, you form that, and okay, this is gonna seem like the little brother. So
Yeah.
Oh, is that
Can John
does
hear us?
that is that does that echo mean that John can hear us?
oh, I'm
Slight delay.
yes, slight delay.
This is like one of your scripts, Chuck.
Yeah,
We
I've
can't
got
wait to come
you
back.
on YouTube. I'm so
Ah,
sorry it didn't
Oh,
work
brilliant.
out.
Brilliant.
That's okay.
All right. We should let
Yeah.
John tell us about the. Is there a
Yeah, he's
slight
a little
delay?
behind there. Yeah. I'm trying to get him to look at his direct messages, but I don't know.
The beauty of doing live streams is
Yeah.
you're a servant to the technical gremlins.
Yeah, and I feel so. Listen, this is about John, and I feel bad hogging the mic. He's
Yeah. Hopefully we can get into the last 10 minutes here. Let's see.
So, Chuck, just before
Stand by.
we link up with John, hopefully we will catch up.
yeah.
What are you working on now? Where is your career right now? Where have you landed? Your extraordinary career. Where have you landed at?
Well, it's a little odd. I'm getting ready to go to Ukraine. I am a special correspondent for the Kyiv Post. I've been
Right.
covering the war for a couple of years now. So going back to Ukraine, and this is my wife often tells me, "Look, I married a writer. I didn't marry a war correspondent. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And again, listen, I have no look. I am not the man I used to be. Now I am older and slower. And look, I know it. So I'm not going over there to win the war. I'm just, I'm going to continue my coverage of it. I wrote a novel about the death of Che Guevara a couple years ago. We're putting that out now in Spanish, which it should have been translated. Did that book for Random House. But I think it probably will be another novel. I would guess. Once you sort of defect from Hollywood and disrespect them as I have been here, it's your career's over. So, but I don't mind. It's a mutual decision.
No, it's,
Don't worry, we won't let him know.
Yeah, well, no.
Your secrets are safe with us.
Yeah, I won't tell anybody.
you've,
You know what
you've
this is?
got
It's three of these, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your life seems to be an extraordinary mix of the writer's life, as far as I know it, is the inside of your room, your desk, your keyboard, and staring out the window longingly, avoiding all work. But you've led this life where you've done extraordinary things and had a great experience and lived right at the kind of adrenaline-fueled edge of things, and also been a writer. It's an interesting contrast in your world.
Yeah, but you're right. It is, writing gets done in a room. It's sealed off. My wife and I have this joke. I'm sorry I'm being such an asshole. I'm finishing my novel. So and it's the writer's life. You look, I'm talking to writers. You guys know.
Yeah.
And just you hit it right on the head. You get in the room and you look out the window because you don't want to write. It's too hard. Right.
Yeah. I think I've had that exact same exchange with my wife. So
Exactly. And it's, you know what, but I'm very humble and happy that I've been able to make a living at it. And there's something that I really love about writing is it is humbling.
Yeah.
Your Hemingway started with the same paper you did. What did you come up with? Right?
You've been quite hard on yourself, Chuck.
I want to, listen, I absolutely love my wife.
Yeah.
She is the toughest editor I've ever had. And she's a writing coach, right? She just goes, look, you can do better than that.
Yeah, oh, yeah. The best words and also the most hurtful words you can have, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Or she goes like, we have this joke like that shouldn't have come downstairs because my study's upstairs, Leave that upstairs.
And just talking thematically about the thing, I feel like something we talk about a lot in the documentary and just amongst ourselves is how relevant this film has been over the years, again and again, whether it's, Cold War paranoia or pandemic related. I mean, what are your thoughts on how you can kind of plug this into any era and you'll still feel fresh?
Oh, absolutely. But, that is the genius of it. They went out there and they told this story that resonates. And, I have this very ambivalent relationship with film critics. I've had them hate the stuff I did, even though it was a number one, and I've had them go crazy and worship at the feet of the screenplay. For example, with Darkman, you know, but a really great piece of work is when someone, and in this case, I'm specifically talking about The Thing, they could put that on there. This is a metaphor for AIDS. This is a metaphor for the Cold War. This is a metaphor for, and everyone's right because the work is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you could say, well, this is knockoff blood and guts horror movie. No, 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 no.
I think it's a beautiful film about paranoia. The fact these men probably would have ended up killing each other even if the alien hadn't turned up. You know, they were already at a point, you know, and it's saying something about the confinement of men, particularly men, in one place, isolated over a period of time. And it isn't not pretty. It's not a good picture of humanity.
No, but it's, the storytelling. The dog, and, opens up with the dog and the helicopter, and they're
Yeah.
shooting at him. And, I actually was on military exchange in Norway, and almost everyone speaks English. But these are the only Norwegians in the world that don't speak English and can't say, "Look, the dog's got the critter in him," you know. But that the storytelling, it starts. I mean, in the technical term, there's the hook. This dog blasting across the ice, a helicopter, guy hangs out. Why are they trying to kill the dog? Why is the dog doing all these really smart? It grabs you. It's technically a perfect screenplay. Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
When,
And
when you first saw the film, then Chuck, did you think, as I did, why are they shooting at a dog? Leave him alone. Or were you like, no, 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 there's something weird going on here. Don't trust that fiend.
I really, I kind of got it from the beginning. First of all, you want to make a villain in a Hollywood movie, have him kick a dog. Okay, that's it.
Oh, yeah.
The audience will never be on that guy's side, right? So I also thought, look, there's something up with that dog. Look, now I'm thinking like a SEAL. I'm going to start the helicopter up, burn the gas, get the rifle, hang out. Come on, for a dog. So I knew something was totally up. But again, that just you knew there was something up with that dog. The way the dog kind of snuggles up and goes, hey, yeah.
Don't get me now. See, I was a kid when I first saw the movie, so I was more I was lured in by the fluffy critter. I was like, the dog's fine, nothing wrong there. And then the kennel scene happened. I'm like, oh
Oh,
no!
It's a beautiful, ironic stuff, isn't it? The one thing you want to love is the dog. And the great irony is the dog is the thing. The dog is the thing. So it shows us you can't trust your own instincts in this situation.
You can't trust John
dog.
Carpenter. I mean, Assault on Precinct 13, where he kills the kid as well. He does the things you're not meant to do in films. You don't kill the kid. You don't kill the dog. No, we lost Chuck.
oh, well, something I really want to ask the backers quickly, and please sound off in the comments because it doesn't look like we're going to get John, unfortunately, today. But if we did a follow-up stream maybe this week or next, would you guys be down for that? Because I would still love to speak with John and hear
Yeah,
his
you can get that.
his side of things.
Yeah.
Do like a little bonus stream. Is that something people would be interested in? And
We'll go over
I
all the
already-
technical gremlins beforehand.
Yeah,
so that-
exactly. So
We
we'll
thought
make
we had
sure,
him. He kept getting pulled away from us. But
yeah. But yes, we will. Yeah, I would love to do a follow-up stream
yeah.
with John and Chuck if he's available.
So we've been left to our own devices. I don't know whether Chuck
Yes.
will return to us. Oh, Chuck's
No.
back. All right.
There he is.
Yay.
We lost Chuck.
Chuck, we were
I had to go out.
just talking.
There was a dog at my front door. I had.
Oh, speak of the
And
devil.
several Norwegians asking to...
Shouting at you.
Chuck,
Dog. It's not a dog. It's not a dog.
Chuck, we were just talking about doing a potential follow-up stream within the next week or so with John. We'll figure out all the problems ahead of time if you'd like to join us again.
I would be absolutely delighted. And John, I am so sorry. This was supposed to be the John show, and
we'll get it.
I'm so happy to come back on for that. That would be lovely.
Okay,
Thank you.
cool. Awesome. Yeah, so we'll figure that out. I don't know, we can figure out scheduling later.
We'll
yeah.
sort that out. Cool.
Yes,
And
please,
Ian, just real
says Nick
quick,
Nichols.
Yeah.
where do we stand production-wise?
Production-wise, I would say we're well over halfway. which is a frightening thing to say because there's a lot of work to be done still. And we're at a stage where we've put together, I think, about half the chapters. The film is the documentary is divided into chapters, which are based on the story of the thing. So each chapter follows the sequential part of the film. And we've done 1 through 6, and we've done a bit of 8 and 9, and I think one of the later ones. And it's a point where you start, the story starts to emerge. What's really interesting about making a documentary like this is how much the original film, the thing itself, tells you what the documentary will be. Dictates the feel of the documentary, dictates the stories you tell, dictates the feel of thing. And it's a film. It's a mystery film, sensibly, without a solution. And it's really intriguing just to feel how much of the mystery can I attempt to solve. How much do I just have to stand back from? And just those kind of questions have been wonderful to kind of toy with. And to just get the feel of what those guys were up to in Alaska and in LA. And, this funny stuff, Stuart Cohen, who's the producer, who has an incredible recall of everything that happened, just kept mentioning about, all they were doing was chain smoking the whole way through it. Nicotine kept out. They were up in Alaska, chain smoking away. I thought this is such an early 80s film. But you realize that there was a kind of spirit offset that matches what you feel in the film. So it's coming together really well. I'm pretty pleased.
Oh, glad to hear
I
it.
do like the idea, that sentence alone. Oh yeah, the behind the scenes making of the thing. Such a funny story. Like the thing. You just think it's a funny film. Nice comedy.
They had tough times.
It was terrifying the first time I saw it. I mean, it just kept, something would pop out of somebody and it would just keep coming, and then the head would come off and sprout legs and run across the lab. It was like,
Because it's totally unpredictable, isn't it? It's not like if you get a werewolf movie or a vampire movie, you get a sense of what's coming. You may not know what direction it comes from. But with the thing, you've got no idea where it's coming from, or who it's coming from, or how it's going to appear. You are completely, victim of the idea, which is just tremendous.
Yeah.
And that's why it's elevated beyond different horror films, right? Because, like you said, Ian, with like vampire films and werewolf films, you know what's going to happen. You know the rules. The rules to a horror film, as is explained in Scream. Everyone knows the rules, but when you take the rules away, you don't know what you're dealing with. It's scary. Going back to what Chuck said, the Minotaur on the Labyrinth, you're in its domain, so you have to deal with its rules.
But
it's terrifying.
Yeah, that is great. No silver bullets, right? No stake through the heart. No full moon.
Just a blood test. Just a scratch through the hot metal wire and a petri dish.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The great equalizer.
Even the first time they did that, I went,
It's such a goof. If you look at it again, the effect is so goofy because you can see the rubber hand, the whole thing of it.
Yeah, it's like a little blow up.
Yeah, it's a little bladder.
And we are waiting. John did have a question. He says he's been wanting to ask you for like over 30 years. So I'm just waiting. If you want to hang out for just 1 sec. See what that question
John at least ask a question.
Yeah, I'm waiting for carrier pigeon. It's gonna.
It's only been 30 years, John. You think he would have.
Right.
But he was so great to work with, you guys. What a.
Joe, just tell me, let's ask you some traditional questions. What are the movies, obviously apart from The Thing, that have inspired you? What are the ones you grew up with that were your kind of movies?
I loved Breaker Morant. I wrote a court-martial drama. It didn't see the light of day about that. What are some things? Corny, not corny. Lawrence of Arabia.
Of course.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. T.E. Lawrence is probably one of my absolute heroes of my life. What an amazing, complex individual he was. And what's so sad is that this guy gave so much. He was a brilliant writer, a brilliant self-taught military tactician, a giant of literature, and he hated his own guts.
Yeah.
He despised himself.
The
better the writing, the more self-loathing.
Yeah, he had another couple of quirks too. We won't go into, but they were a little bit quirky.
But the film captures all those things really well, doesn't it? Without
It,
dwelling on them, it captures that complexity.
it does. If you know what you're looking at,
Yeah,
you absolutely know. When the first time I saw it, I'm 10 years old, went right over my head. But you read Seven Pillars of Wisdom and other books about him, and you get everything. Again, so elegantly done.
yeah,
You meet him in the map making shop in Cairo, and you love the guy right away. You just
yeah,
think he's this guy. It's funny that is what being an officer in the SEAL teams is like. We don't have a lot of sir, yes sir, no sir. At SEAL Team 6, you're on a first name basis, right? They don't call me Commander Farr, they call me Chuck, or worse things. Extremely collegial. But again, it's like leading a pack of wolves, right? They're all equal to you, and many are superior to you, so you have to bring a bunch of things together to get the best out of them. So,
Right. And while we wait potentially for John's question to come, if not, we'll do it on the second stream. But just earlier in the chat, somebody mentioned that you did kind of tie up a plot point. We never saw what happened to Knowles, T.K. Carter's character. And in the comic, Mac finds him and he was ostensibly infected. I mean, what was it like? Did you go in saying, like, I'm going to, wrap up these plot points that we didn't see finished in the movie?
I wanted it to be like that or give that impression. But another thing I told you I was toying with was, can you be infected and not think you are? But here's the other thing: could you recover from an infection?
Could you fight off the infection?
Is
Yeah,
Yeah.
could
there
you
an
fight
answer
off the
to the thing?
infection, or something bursts out of your body like, I don't know, in a horrifying John Carpenter way, like a boil or something, and then you would be recovered. So I had all these little index cards up, and again, I was supposed to take it for editions. I just got buried,
Yeah.
and
But it's one of those things that the more you think about it, the bigger it gets, isn't it? It's the more questions it asks.
well, I'm talking to the right guys. You guys are, you are scholars of the film and making a film about the film. So,
Yeah, and it's a kind of madness. I think I won't come out of this with my sanity intact, but that's fine. That's the job.
but some things are worth it.
Yeah,
This is underappreciated. Listen, I love aliens, but Alien,
yeah,
but as far as getting into the canon and look, I love Ridley Scott. I mean, Blade Runner is absolutely one of my favorite movies in the world. But we get into the engineers and all that stuff's cool, but it's sort of like, look, only Ridley Scott could turn in a movie cut that looked like that because the studio would otherwise go,
yeah.
look, come on,
Yeah. What are we doing?
what's going on here with the black? Come on, we're gonna get Jean Claude Van Damme and put him in here, and this is gonna be great.
I want my xenomorphs to kill more people. Put them in this movie. That's
That's
what sells.
that's what sells, right? All Van Damme, all damn day, and Jake, actually go back a long way with Jean Claude, like way back before he was famous, when he was driving a limo. So, JC,
But
I
Chuck, we
love
have
you.
a surprise for you.
We have
Here's
a surprise for you. Exactly.
Jean-Claude Van
Listen,
Damme.
we go back. We go back. So it's funny. I wanted Armand Asante to play in Hard Target.
Okay, that's
That
interesting.
yeah,
I can see that. I
and
can definitely see that.
I
Yeah.
based the character off my brother, who is a merchant Marine officer who did sail out of New Orleans and one time couldn't get on his ship because he didn't pay his union dues. So,
So the whole setup. Yeah.
yeah, so I predicated on him. My brother is this great big gorilla of a guy, and his men call him the Wookiee.
That
So,
must be a heartbreaking phenomenon as well. When you have someone in mind and the character is so intrinsically linked to a particular person, and you say this is who should play that person. Nah, let's get Jean-Claude Van Damme instead.
yeah, but you know what? So this all sounds crazy. It shows how old I am. So this completely unknown guy comes in to audition for Darkman, and we're sitting there, and I hate to be at auditions because I can't break people's heart. I just
Yeah.
can't do it. And this guy comes in and he's pretty good. He leaves. We all look at each other and go, man, I think he could work. I think he could do it. Yeah, complete unknown named Liam Neeson.
To this day, still can't do a good American accent though. I hate it when they ask Liam to do anything other than his native accent.
Exactly. Just be you, Just
Yeah.
be you. But that, I also have this theory that there is so much more talent in the world than people know about.
Yeah.
There are so many talented people.
Get pushed away because they want a name, a
You,
pre-established name.
you guys know it. Absolutely. And those of us who don't have these big names, you just have to work harder. You have to do something so good they can't resist screwing you over and making money off it.
So how are we
many.
doing, Josh? Have we heard from John? Is he?
Is so far nothing. I mean, I think we're going to have to just roll it into the next. We'll just keep it on a cliffhanger, so you guys have to tune back in.
We'll have to
Tune
call it
in
an
for
end.
part
We've
two.
overrun a bit.
Because he's been holding on to this question for 35 years and 6 months. He says,
It'll
and I don't
hold
know
for
where
another
it is.
couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we could do it this week. Maybe we could do it next weekend. We'll figure it out.
All right.
We will get John. We'll work out all the kinks ahead of time, and yeah.
Stay
apologize,
tuned to the
but,
social
Yeah.
to know when.
We're at the exactly. We're at the mercy of the machines here, people.
We should give our thanks to Chuck though, because it's been a
Yes.
wonderful.
Thank you so much.
entertainment.
Guys, thanks for having me.
No, just what a pleasure. What a career. It's pleasure
Yes.
to find out about all the stuff you've done. It's been really great.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you for your service to our country, and just thank you for being on the stream.
My pleasure, guys. And I'm really looking forward to talking to John. He's the guy, right? So this isn't the Chuck show. This was the John show. We'll get that going.
Yeah. This is not goodbye. This is see you later.
All right.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Okay, well, thanks everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Until next time.